I'd like to call the July 29th, 2014 special City Council meeting to order. Amy Jo Pearsall, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome everybody. This is our special City Council meeting to discuss our Economic Development Summit, and we've got Amy Jo, our interim city attorney, all ready to go. And then when we get done, I'll have some announcements just for the good of the order. Amy Jo, if you would.
Okay. So yes, we're here to discuss the Economic Development Summit that we'll be holding later this year and the creation of the Economic Development Task Force. There are a series of study sessions that will occur. We're currently on the second one as listed on this slide. There will be another one prior to the regular meeting on Tuesday, August 12th at 5:30. At our previous meeting, the discussion was initiated to talk about the vision and process for the beginning of the summit. And at that meeting, you began to identify the mission, focus, strategy, and process of this task force. Some of the takeaways from the last meeting were that council participation was very important, that these were to be public meetings. We would address the moratorium that was passed earlier this year regarding the downtown zones. We would include stakeholders, interested citizens, and also the hidden gems in the community that may not have previously been identified. And that the structure of this would include subcommittees. For today, we'd like to continue to identify those items, the mission, focus, and strategy. And some of the specifics we'd like to talk about are the makeup of the task force itself, the goals of the task force, what some of those subcommittees would be, and the scope of those subcommittees. So this is pretty open. This is the purposes for your discussion. So as we go through these items, please feel free to discuss and interrupt and involve yourself in the discussion and decisions. So potential members of the task force, as I've indicated before, would include interested residents and our hidden gems, perhaps Sound Transit representation, Lake Haven representation, and school district. But as far as practicalities, we need to decide on a number. The 7 of you plus 7 or 8 would make 14 or 15. I know that in the last discussion it was mentioned that 20 would be too large, so we kind of need to pin down the size that we're talking about so that we can fill in those vacancies. The goal is to announce the members at the September 16th council meeting, but the first item of business is sort of to decide what this task force is going to look like.
And it could even be 16, you know, if
yeah,
we had
it can
9.
be whatever you guys would like. We just sort of need to decide that at this stage. So I don't know if there's any thoughts on that.
Oh,
Okay.
do you want comments on that now?
We're going to go through and comment on each of these slides.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
that's all right.
Councilmember Maloney.
Thank you. Just a suggestion, I think it's great to have Sound Transit, Lake Haven, and the school district, but maybe those could be subcommittees, and maybe they don't need representation on the overall task force, and then that frees up more room for these hidden gems that we've discussed.
Right, and major stakeholders in the community. Councilmember Duclos?
No, I was questioning first if we were.
Oh, okay. Okay. Councilmember Selski?
Yeah, so I kind of agree with that. You know, I kind of broke this down in terms of membership into a couple of different, I guess, categories that we could probably include. And one, of course, is city government. We talked about the council up there. Probably our economic development director as a member. And then I looked at a couple other categories. One was business. So some representative from the business community, maybe the Chamber of Commerce, a couple of members. And then I thought we better include, or we may want to consider including downtown property owners, because they're the ones that are going to have to buy into this and take ownership, as well as, you know, the city and other representatives. So the property owners from downtown, and maybe even a financial professional. We saw the result of that on the Blue Ribbon panel when we pulled some financial people together. Yeah. And then I agree with Councilmember Maloney. and that was kind of what I considered the infrastructure category. You know, the Lake Haven Rep, School District, maybe even South King Fire and Rescue, because I think we could draw some expertise and some subcommittees from that. And lastly, the last category I looked at was development experts, urban planners, urban architects, somebody like that, maybe even a major contractor who may want to become involved as well. And of course, this is all voluntary, so we wouldn't, you know, we would want to kind of keep it at that. And then lastly, citizens at large, and that's already been pointed up there as well. So those kind of categories. But anyway, that's what I had to say.
And we also have Chamber of Commerce as well.
Right.
You know, that's obvious. You know, I think sometimes you, Councilmember Duclos and then Councilmember Honda.
I like the categories that Councilmember Selsky has mentioned. I do want to make sure that we do have council representation on this group. I don't know if it needs to be all 7, but definitely at least 3 council members, I would think.
Okay. Well, Councilmember Honda.
Thank you. I like to always keep in mind that we have more business owners throughout the city, not just downtown, and that we include, if we're going to have a business subcommittee, that we include all business owners throughout the area, because Federal Way is bigger than just downtown.
That's right. Deputy Mayor Burbidge.
Thank you. I concur with the categories that have been mentioned, definitely. And I like the idea of having a specific subcommittee for business folks. I think that having that availability of participation is extremely important for this particular effort. But also, I think to look for some of the expertise in terms of using the Blue Ribbon panel as an example, that we included some really important areas of background on that panel, and or I should say the mayor did.
With your all
with our
input.
recommendations too. But I think that making sure that we take advantage of the opportunity to request that participation and make use of that expertise is very important.
Councilmember Moore.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I just would like to encourage that the whole council be involved. I know that was something that was discussed at the last meeting. I know this is a very extremely important topic, and I'd like for all the council members to be involved from the get-go on this.
You know, may I let me throw out an idea, and this is kind of how I did. Sorry, I remember my last job, jury selection. Let me throw out an idea, and we can maybe bounce it around. What about if and there's 2 ways to go. Then we're all automatic members. Now, what that means though is that then, I mean, if you're a member, then your attendance is essentially, you know, I think there would be an expectation of attendance. Or one of the other ideas, and I just throw this out as an idea, maybe we name 3 or 4 members of the council as permanent members, with everybody having right of access. Just think about that for a second, where everybody has the right to come and to participate, but maybe maybe there's a subset of us that would be dedicated to it. I'm not advocating for the position; it's an idea. Would I see Councilmember Maloney? Okay, Councilmember Sefadossin?
I just have a question. So if you do go with the plan B that you just suggested, would the other council members have a voice?
Yeah, clearly. Here's what I want to avoid is, I mean, just one of the pitfalls perhaps of an expectation is that, you know, if we get busy, or maybe we decide to have the meetings on a Wednesday or a Thursday night, and it's particularly bad for a council member, I want to make sure that we're cognizant of, you know, council members already have committee hearings, you know, the regular council meetings. I don't want to box anybody into a situation in which we've set somebody up for an uncomfortable situation. Just a thought, but I'll entertain. Councilmember Honda.
I think before we even make that decision or go there, we need to know when this group will be meeting, how often, you know, before a council member could even decide if they could be a permanent member. But I think that all council members should be able to go.
Yeah.
And I actually would expect all council members probably would want to go and be involved in every meeting. I don't know why we wouldn't want to do that.
Deputy Mayor?
Oh, I would just concur with that. I have a strong interest, and I expect that all of the other council members have also.
We do, and I think, certainly every council member would always have a seat at the table and always have a voice and a vote in anything that happened. But Councilmember Selsky?
Yeah, I like your idea, actually. I mean, when we're available, certainly everybody's going to want to go to the meetings, but, people travel and whatnot, and so. But the other thing is there's going to be subcommittees that need expertise, and I would think our being involved in a subcommittee or two by choice would be a good thing too, to, again, bring some expertise from the council at that level as well, not just the main forum.
Let me ask a legal question real quick. Amy Jo, we've got a requirement that the city, that it's council meetings that council members, are legally bound to attend, and that an attendance is at the regular city council meetings is part and parcel of their obligations. And we all know from law that unexcused absences, I think 3 unexcused in a row, renders a council position unavailable. If we is there a way to make sure that this would be noted legislatively or by fiat of our creation that an absence by a council member would not be counted toward a quote council meeting for purposes of that type of attendance?
We would need to look at the rules and see how they're drafted. These meetings would be considered special city council meetings, as there's likely to be a quorum at all of them. So they would count as a council meeting. So if we need to, make a record of if we're treating them differently, we can do that, but we may need to. If all of you are going to be members of this task force and be expected to be at all of those meetings. Otherwise, you could do the other option where there's a subset of you, then it would be more like a committee meeting. If less than a quorum of you are going to be at the subcommittee meetings, then that wouldn't be an issue with regard to those.
Okay. Councilmember Selsky and then Councilmember Moore.
So if we're trying to limit this to 15 or 16 positions or something like that, and 7 of them are occupied by mandate by the council, that's going to restrict the number of experts that we can bring on to the panel. So that's why I don't think at all it should be a mandatory, or that inclusion of all council members should be mandatory.
We have a right to have a seat at the table, and again, I'm just exploring this idea to make sure that we're of the same mind and we don't get down that road too far. Councilmember Moore?
Mr. Mayor, just going back to the members, if I may.
Yeah.
One thing I haven't really heard yet, and I wonder how we make this happen, is get our youth involved, our young professionals. So maybe that's something that could be considered. Maybe it's through the Chamber of Commerce. I'm sure we have a lot of young folks that are involved through that capacity. I don't really know, but obviously we're talking about building the future of the city, and it's just something we ought to consider.
That's actually a very insightful comment. I'm going to wait for my insightful comment. Just kidding. Councilmember Honda.
I like your definition of youth, because if it's a young professional, to me, youth is in school, and a young professional is working. So, where are you going with that?
Yeah,
What's your definition?
And I appreciate that. To be specific, I'm talking about young professionals.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of, when we were doing the interviews for the Economic Development Director, one of the applicants, we did a special tour with somebody around the city, and one of the applicants, as they were being driven around the city, actually made the point, where are your 20-somethings going to be going on Friday and Saturday nights? What's an attraction for them to, or to take their young families, or where are these people going to be recreating? And that's a very actually insightful comment about, we want to make sure that, 20 years ago, remember when there was the AMC movie theater and the Kachina right next door? That used to be something that my wife and I and our friends, other couples, we'd do a movie and we'd go next door to Kachina within walking distance. And that's the kind of thing we want to create, that sense of center and sense of destination in our downtown, and that's what young people are looking for. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I'm going to kind of bring us back to track here to
Yeah.
decide if it's going to be 7 or fewer
Right.
of the council.
What do you
So,
think?
I can go either way, so I'm just going to throw out a motion to
Okay.
get us started. And so I'll say that I move that we appoint all 7 members of the city council to the Economic Development Task Force.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that?
Okay, so then that mandates attendance at every meeting.
Why don't we, Councilmember Duclos, thoughts? Would that mandate attendance by all the members? What's your thought?
I don't know if that mandates attendance, because if you're sick, you miss a city council meeting. If you're out of town on business, you have an excused absence. And I would assume that any citizen serving on the committee would be excused if they have something else.
I think it's a good discussion to have to make sure that the expectations among ourselves are clearly set forth. Deputy Mayor Burbidge, did you have
And I'm just throwing this out. We
Yeah.
can kill this and have another motion, so.
Well, I guess I would appreciate additional clarification from our attorney as
Right.
to, you know, if, with this being a special task force, how that definition fits.
I think
with
that
the
that's part of the discussion, is if these are going to be considered special city council meetings that the entire council is not necessarily mandated, but expected to be at, then I think the council rule would apply, and that your absence would need to be excused for it not to count. That makes the most sense under this framework. If you want to keep it a task force, then I don't think you would appoint all 7 members of the council to a task force. Instead, a task force would consist of a subset of the council, and then it would not apply. Those council rules would not apply. Even if more than a quorum happened to be at the meeting, it's not a city council meeting at that point, it's a task force meeting.
Okay, Councilmember Honda and then Councilmember Maloney.
This group of people, are we intending for them to meet 2 months, 4 months, 6 months?
Based on the information that was discussed at the last meeting, I think the idea was that this would end at the end of the year, that
December 31st.
Right, well, the report would be in December sometime, and then I think Councilmember Asefa Dawson mentioned that we don't want to give ourselves too hard fast a deadline, that another option may be to have the sort of final absolute deadline be by your, the word just escaped me, retreat. And so that would be the ultimate end date, would be the report given at the retreat. That's the worst case scenario.
So in the fall, we have budget meetings.
Right.
It could be a very busy fall if, I fully intend to be at every one of these meetings unless I'm in the hospital, which I don't intend to be.
That's good.
I was just going to ask.
It's okay, honey. But I think we do need to be realistic looking at everyone's schedule. If we're going to be doing this in the fall, wrapping it up by December, we do have the extra budget meetings. So.
Councilmember Maloney.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I, in addition to the requirements of being at every meeting, if that is true, I can see where you're going with this. It can get really unwieldy if we have 7 people from council plus the mayor, and then also the other task force members. And I, for one, would like to definitely have council representation, whether it's 7 or 3 or 4, whatever, as long as we're represented. But I'd like to get as many of those hidden gems as possible. So if there's an opportunity to have not all council members required, but definitely welcome, that allows us to open up the meeting to other people as well. So.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember
Yeah,
Selsky.
and I think that was the intent when we first started talking about, this is a task force.
Right.
We know what the Blue Ribbon Panel did. We didn't have representation on it. Could it have been a better outcome if we did? Maybe. It was a great outcome. Could it have been enhanced a little bit more? Possibly, if we had 2 or 3 council members on that. But that's what I'm thinking. I mean, this is a task force. It's not a mandatory council meeting, because we want to populate this with experts that can help get us in further along in economic development. And I don't think we all hold all the best ideas. We hold probably good ideas in that area, but, you know, there's others that are experts in this area and have great input, so.
You know what this reminds me of? Our committee structure, right? When we all, many of us, I was on the council for 10 years, as you know, we have membership at the committees, but then every member of the council's welcome to the committee meetings, and oftentimes we do, either whether it's, you know, land use or FEDREC. So I think Councilmember Duclos was getting us started by throwing out a motion and giving something concrete. Is that what you were going to say?
Yes. And pretty soon I'm going to call a question.
Exactly, exactly. So I think that, you know, she got the ball rolling. Is there an amendment to this?
And I would welcome an amendment.
Is there an amendment in regard to limiting the number to a number of either 3 or 4 members to this task force? Councilmember Honda, and then Maloney, and then Selsky.
I don't have an amendment, but I do have a statement. It might be in our interest if we go along and talk about the subcommittees and when this group will be meeting, so that council members have a better idea of what the commitment might be.
Okay.
And where they might want to fall. Maybe they might want to fall on a subcommittee. So maybe we could postpone the vote until we have more discussion of what the whole idea is here tonight.
Can you table during the course of a meeting, just table by Robert's Rules of Order, just table it, or would tabling it move it to a next meeting?
Tabling it actually basically kills it. So I would suggest that either the motion is withdrawn for the time being, or it's voted on and another motion can be made later.
All right, Councilmember Maloney.
Well, I don't have an amendment either. I wanted to, do you want me to continue, or do you want to resolve this first?
I think we need to resolve this issue real quickly. Okay, Councilmember Selsky and then more.
I would say, I agree, we should either withdraw or I'm going to say we should withdraw and do some more study. I agree with that.
Councilmember Moore.
I'm going to say do an amendment of 3 members.
All right, there's an amendment, a motion. Is there a second on that motion?
What's the amendment?
The amendment is, the motion to amend is that 3 members of the city council would be permanent members of the task force, while the others could attend.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Councilmember Maloney.
Because I didn't have an amendment, but I did have a discussion point that could lead to an amendment, possibly, that I guess at this point, is it too late to bring that up now?
Yes.
Okay. No, she said no.
If it's on point,
All right.
So
hash
what
it out.
I was thinking is if we could amend it possibly to have each council member representing, 1 or 2 council members representing a committee. And then when it's, and everyone can come to the task force meetings, but the people on point for the task force, the council members on point for the task force are the ones who are representing that committee at that particular meeting or at that particular time. And so then we all have a major role on the task force, but it's dependent on whether that committee is being discussed at that meeting. Does that make sense? Maybe it's too convoluted.
So you support 3 members of the council, and then they would be essentially chairs of
I was thinking
subcommittees?
that, for instance, Susan Deeney and I, since we're already on the rebranding committee,
Yes.
we would be on that on that subcommittee. And then when the task force is talking about rebranding, we would be the representation for the council at that particular task force meeting.
Yeah.
And then at the next meeting, if there's something about, I don't know what the other topic might be, but maybe council members Moore, Selsky, and the deputy mayor are on that task force, and then they would be representing on that committee, and then they would be representing at that next meeting that covers that at the next task force. Is that too convoluted? I'm okay if it's too convoluted. I was just thinking that gives everyone a definitive role.
Yeah.
Councilmember Moore.
Yeah, I like that idea, because I think this is such an important issue that no one should be left behind in terms of being involved in an integral part, if that makes any sense how I just said that. And I think by Councilmember Maloney's way of doing that, I think it really involves everybody in a more important capacity. So that, I would seem to favor that concept.
So then, just a point of clarification, then who is actually, who are the members of the task force? Are there 3 or 4 members of the task force? Or were all members of the council, are all 7 members of the council are members of the task force?
Well, I mean, this can be defined by the group, but I'm thinking that none of us are literal members of the task force, but we are there when when our committee is represented, but we can all be there though at every task force meeting if we want to be. Does that make sense? But we are required to be there when the committee that we represent is being discussed.
Okay, I think I got that. Councilmember Moore.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I would say, so we obviously have 3 council members that are part of the actual summit that are members, if I'm understanding this correctly, and maybe this will be a question as well.
Well, we're all gonna be there at the very, but
But these are like official voting members, right?
well,
I think-
there are going to be concrete recommendations coming out of this task force.
Right.
And that's what's gonna be coming out.
Because, yeah. Oh.
Deputy Mayor Burbidge.
I think maybe this structure is a good idea, partly because the council will be actually responding and evaluating the recommendations of the task force. And we really don't need to be part of the voting part of the task force, because we'll be reviewing those recommendations and having a voice afterward.
Okay,
It's more formal.
so Lydia.
And I also agree with what Kelly said, because then I think it allows for other members, potential members, to take up all 14 or 15 seats, because they are important and crucial, and we could serve in other capacities and still be as engaged and involved as the other members. At
All right,
different
is there a
capacities.
friendly, Councilmember Moore, would you be willing to withdraw your amendment?
Yes.
And Councilmember Duclos, would you withdraw that second? Yes. All right, and now moving over to our esteemed colleague, Councilmember Maloney.
I am not sure how to put that in words.
What I heard was
okay.
that there's no permanent members of the task force as a whole, but rather council members will be individually assigned to specific subcommittees and will have their influence on the task force in that way. And then, of course, eventually will have their influence on the end results and how they digest that end result. So there's no one member on the task force as a whole, but members of subcommittees instead.
Councilmember Duclos.
Just a clarification, though, if you're on a subcommittee, then you remember the task force.
Well, I mean, I guess that's the question, because we've talked about having some other members that are participating in subcommittees but aren't actually going to be necessarily members of the task force as a
Per
whole.
se.
So they'll just give information to those people, and those people decide one way or another whether they want to
Yes.
include that.
And the council always
true.
retains the right to
I'm
attend
not-
every meeting, and it'll be open to the
And
public.
participate.
Yeah, but I'm not sure I like that idea at all.
Okay, well, that's why we're, the devil's in the detail,
Yep.
so Deputy Mayor Burbidge.
Well, and I hear your concern, Councilmember Duclos, but I would just add perhaps a clarification that we would have the ability as council members to participate actively in the meetings.
No, I'm not questioning that. I'm questioning that if there's subsets of the committee and they make recommendations and then they're turned down, that committee, the subset of the whole committee has been looking on something and it's not accepted. That's an issue for me.
Okay. Well, I think, no matter what we do, no matter what the task force comes to us with in regard to firm recommendations, the ultimate acting authority rests with this legislative body. And it would be essentially like, it'd be like us all, we all have the right to attend commission meetings. It's actually very much like a commission meeting, frankly, and so there have been occasions in which we disagree with the ultimate findings of a commission, and obviously that has created its own dynamic at times. But the final decision always rests with the council. So I'm just thinking out loud here. Anybody else? Now there was was that in the form of a motion, Councilmember Maloney?
Yes, let's make that in the form of a motion.
All right, and is there a second to that?
Second.
All right, and is there a Councilmember Self?
So can we restate the motion again?
Amy Jo, will you try one more time?
Sure. So the original motion was, of course, for all 7 members. And this is an amendment to that motion to say, rather than have the 7 members be members of the task force as a whole, instead they are appointed to specific subcommittees, which are still yet to be determined. And they will have their influence on that task force decisions or recommendations, really, as members of subcommittees or participation in subcommittee meetings rather than as members of the entire task force. With that said, they will still participate. You all will still participate at the task force meetings and will actively be involved in those meetings, but you won't be, for lack of a better term, voting members, but there shouldn't be any voting necessarily. But it will be the task force then, that task force recommendation to council, which makes sense. If you were members of that task force, you'd be making recommendations to yourselves.
Right.
I'd like to call a question.
All right.
Can I just make one caveat to that,
Yes.
though? The only particular element of that now I lost my train of thought. Let me think back for a second. So the committee members, there would be a requirement to be at a task force if you are on a committee that's reporting. So that's the only caveat.
All right, I would just say more loosely an expectation, but not a requirement.
Question's been called.
The question has been called and it's non-debatable. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
This is just the amendment, correct?
Could we restate the amendment?
You're on, Amy Jo, one more time.
Just simply, so everybody is on the same
The
page.
amendment is to have council members appointed to subcommittees, and they will work on the subcommittee work. They will not be members of the task force, but they will be required to attend task force meetings or expected to attend task force meetings in which their subcommittee is reporting to the task force. And, I thought she was gonna say something. And then the task force itself, without council membership, are the one that will be reporting, making their findings and recommendations to the city council.
Right, but point of information, it would be that all council members would be always
Yes.
able to attend the
And actively
meetings.
participate and have feedback into that.
Okay.
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
All right.
Deputy Mayor Burbidge.
Aye.
Councilmember Sefadofis Dawson.
Aye.
Councilmember Maloney.
Aye.
Councilmember Honda.
Aye.
Councilmember Selsky.
Nay.
Councilmember Moore.
Nay.
Councilmember Duclos.
Nay.
Motion carries 4-3.
And that is just the amendment. So now the pending motion is as amended, and we still need to vote on that motion.
I'd like to withdraw the motion.
Second?
You know what I suggest, may I? I actually, what I would like to do, because I think we're getting really into the weeds on this exact structure issue, is why don't we could there be a motion to table this to the next meeting so we can talk?
I would so move.
Okay.
To a date certain, that's the date.
That's fine. We can move on from this and come
Okay.
back to it.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor of tabling us to the next meeting?
Aye.
All right. And then we'll work on this structure. I think doing this from the dais is actually a little clumsy right now.
Even that conversation, though, was very fruitful and a very useful exercise in order to understand where people are coming from, what expectations there are, and so it was still a great discussion.
Okay.
If I could just say one thing.
Yeah, Councilmember Duclos.
I think we learned from the last task force that was established. We got really great information from them. It was very helpful in making our decision, but I think the council had felt left out of that.
Yeah.
I think we want representation on this group, but I don't know that it has to be the whole council. I just threw that motion out to get us
Yep.
going, that's all.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Structure is very important, and process is really important. It's so let's discuss it we'll discuss amongst ourselves, as they say, and we'll figure that out. But Amy Jo, can we move on to the next item?
Yes. So the next item to discuss are the goals of the task force. What was identified in the previous meeting was that we would need a work plan something that actually Councilmember Duclos referred to as a working document that would allow council to hit the ground running. So that's what we want out of this. But the question is whether there are any other goals for this. If there are short-term goals, long-term goals, we need to identify what we're shooting for in order to obtain that.
Who,
Why don't we, you know what, why don't we do this? Let's run through the whole thing,
Okay,
and then we're gonna come back. We're gonna resume
Perfect.
at work plan.
Okay.
Let's run through the whole thing, and then we'll come back.
so the last topic, which has several elements, are the subcommittees. And we've discussed that somewhat. And some of the ideas that have been thrown out so far are a subcommittee on rebranding, marketing, and including a market study, the code amendments and design guidelines, and that would specifically address the moratorium, retention, and recruitment. And so I'll go through each of these and show what sort of the ideas are for each of these, and then we can go back through each one and see first if those are the categories that you would like, or if you'd like to add anything to these sections. So the first one was the rebranding and marketing subcommittee. Potential topics would include whether we would incorporate the work of the ad hoc rebranding committee, the discussing the market forces now and in the future, and a market study to cover where we are today, where we will be in 5 years, how we can position ourselves to capitalize on opportunities, and an inventory of our current assets. The second potential subcommittee would be the code amendments and design guidelines. As I stated, this would address the moratorium, and it would specifically get into whether design guidelines are needed for the downtown core and frame. The third potential subcommittee is for retention. This would discuss strategies for how to grow and enhance the businesses we currently have, strengthen those relationships, and create new partnerships. And finally, recruitment. Again, this would be strategies to attract new businesses and repurposing of old buildings from businesses that we unfortunately have lost, and how to get folks into those buildings.
Councilmember Honda?
my question is, we're in the process of hiring an economic development director. Would some of these ideas should come from him too, or her, or, are we one step ahead of where we might be or where we should be?
I think the idea, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the new economic development director will be an integral part of this entire process. Right. So, a lot of this may come from that person, but we would also like to hear from experts in the field that may not be a member of staff.
So when this person is hired and is on staff and this task force is meeting, if that person wanted to add or suggest that one of these subcommittees might not be the best and might have another idea, I'm just wondering if we're putting ourselves ahead of where we should be. And
It's a good question, and I think that what we would do is, we're actually, in regard to who's going to make the ultimate decision on membership of this, ultimately, it's going to be, I'm going to be included in that, the deputy mayor is going to be included in that, but then we've got to figure out, okay, who else is involved? And I do think that we've got to, whether it's another member, right now the agenda setting team is myself, the deputy mayor, and Councilmember Duclos, and so that's how we set the agenda up for our meetings. So we are going to have to find a mechanism in which we come to final determination as to who these members are. But I think part and parcel of that is essentially an agenda setting function for this. And certainly before we ever changed anything, we would seek the consensus of the council and input. I mean, if we felt like we're wasting time on a committee or a subject, we would certainly let the council know that.
well, my question was, the new staff member that we're hiring to direct the city in economic development might have ideas on what subcommittees would be helpful in this process, and perhaps we should, instead of having these four, which sound fine,
Yeah.
but perhaps the director might have a better idea or refine this, and perhaps we could wait until, when is the goal of having the task force start? Do we have
I think we want to have the task force in place and announced on September 16th.
Will we have a new economic development director?
Yes.
So could this potentially wait then till a next meeting or until we can have input from
It could.
him or her?
It could. Actually, we're going to have the answer to that question sooner rather than later. But we anticipate the economic development director starting in early September.
And I think we don't have to make any final decisions tonight, but I think it would be important to get any feedback that you do have on these potential subcommittees so that we don't have to make any final decisions, but it would be good to get feedback if council is willing to do that at this time.
Okay. But let's have I think feedback is very important. Before that, where were we? We're on code amendments.
That is one of them, yes.
All right. And then had you gone through retention and recruitment?
Not yet. I was just going backwards to sort of just look at the four just generically right here
Right.
and see if anyone sees any glaring holes at this point, if anything's missing or not addressed.
Yeah, I think if there's anything missing or not addressed, it'll come up when the committee is meeting, and they would make another category.
I'm just, are you calling on me?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, that's what this means.
Yeah. I'm wondering if retention and recruitment are close. There are definitely different activities that need to be done for them, but I'm wondering if they're close enough that they could combine to make one committee. But it's just throwing that out there. I'm also wondering if a subcommittee could be around some of the industries that we've already defined as wanting to focus on in the city.
Right. We should add that. And that's under our
Recruitment.
But frankly, actually, the language I see a lot is retention. Thank you. That the focus you see with retention and recruitment are really not the pairs that would go together. It's retention and expansion, and then recruitment would be a separate animal. And that's where under recruitment, that's where we'd have going after some target companies.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I was just thinking if we needed to combine committees, it might be possible, because in my mind, to me, it's almost like sales and upsales. Recruitment
Right.
is business development, and
Right.
retention is how do you keep them here and retain them. And those could be interrelated, but they don't have to be.
Okay.
No, actually, recruitment could be under expansion.
Right.
And I think,
Councilmember Sapadowski.
yeah, and then one of the potential partners we have not discussed yet also would be service providers, and or something like the housing authority or people that do have a lot of services in our community. I think should also be brought to the table.
Okay. So, let's see here. Yeah, it is. It is something to think about. Now, where were we on the?
So now we can just, again, going through each of these potential areas, if there's anything we're missing, it sounds like we've addressed some of them. But if there was any concerns with sort of the potential topics under each of these subcommittees.
I think inherent, the very last item on there, could you go back up one, please?
Yeah.
The inventory of current assets. Yeah, I remember when Kemper Freeman came to Federal Way just about a month ago, over maybe a month or two ago, at one of Pete von Reichbauer's Good Egg Breakfast. He talked about their very methodical approach in regard to figuring out what their inventory, but also what the demands or needs of the community would be. And I think that we may even want to. One of the things that we're going to want to know is how do you assess that, and whether we actually need to get contract with somebody to assess the current inventory of businesses and what's missing. And it was almost a very scientific, if not a completely scientific approach to what do we have, what are we missing. So that's something I think we should consider. Okay.
Anything else for rebranding or marketing?
Councilmember Maloney?
I'm just not specific to this, but you just triggered something in my mind. So when we were talking about earlier, really what the goals are of this, I think it's hard. I think one reason, at least I think one reason I'm struggling with this whole conversation is that I still don't know what the end goal is. And if we're going to be looking at an inventory of assets and defining what's missing, we have to decide first, what do we want? And what does our community want? And so, you know, there's a lot of stuff that's missing, but is it missing only because it's in other places, or is it missing because we need it here? Does that make sense?
It does. Actually, this conversation is exactly what Kemper was talking about, which is instead of us trying to figure out what we want, you go and figure out what the market would bear.
That's right.
And what the market is demanding. Deputy Mayor.
Right. And just to carry that a little further in terms of the economic evaluation, you know, we get told certain things about where we sit in terms of the market rates. Okay, but it's my impression that what has been done to analyze this kind of thing is more of a broad brush kind of thing, determining averages. And if you look at the total picture in Federal Way, there is we have a bell curve of some sort or another. It isn't necessarily the absolutely typical bell curve, but there are different segments of that. So how does that fit with opportunities that are in our city? Because we have certain segments of our community that that bring a different level of economic opportunity to bear. And I wouldn't want us to miss out on those opportunities too.
I agree. I think in regard to what the goal is here, I mean, I think it's, and that's what we've been talking about, which is, obviously we want to make sure that we retain our current businesses, but I think what we all agree on is investment in our community and the population of our core areas.
Right, but can I just respond to that?
Yeah, and then Councilmember Duclos.
So I think what I really meant, I guess, is we don't have a collective vision. What is the vision that we're going for? And those were conversations I was hoping to have about, for instance, let me just throw out so we've talked about in the past having a kind of medical incubator or presence here, like be known for a medical whatever, I can't think of anything,
Right.
but research, thank you. And then the college initiative is research and development and higher education. And so are we gonna move towards those? Are we gonna have a trajectory towards those? Or are we just gonna kind of like spatter it out there? And I'd like to see us have a vision that we all agree with, that we can be, several kind of sub things that we can be moving toward in concert, rather than just kind of saying, okay, well, we're gonna do this and we're gonna try and track this and this and this.
Right. Well, I think that this, go ahead, Councilmember Duclos.
Yeah, we just had a meeting, so we sort of touched on some of these in our discussion. I think, this is very, very important for us, and I think what we need to decide and then give direction to this task force and whoever's on it from the council, whether it's the whole council or 3 people or we're on subcommittees, is where are we? How do we fit? And the most important, crucial thing is, where do we want to be?
Right.
And how soon are we going to get there?
Right.
And then that defines what the subcommittees are going to be and what we can actually clearly lay out some steps.
And then
And I'm looking forward to our new, and where are we going? That's how we get there.
Right.
But we want to know where we're going first, because then we need to develop the roadmap to get there. And that's what I'm hoping the new economic developer will help us with too.
And what are we willing to do to get there?
Yes.
What assets are
Well,
we willing to deploy?
And those are all the subsets of where
Yeah.
okay, you start here, you're going here. You need to stop here for gas, you need to get this, you need to get that. That all fits in along that roadmap.
Very good. Okay. Councilmember Moore and then Maloney. Councilmember Honda and then Maloney. Oh my gosh. Go ahead, Martin. I'm just kidding. Councilmember Honda.
So then would it be a good idea then to, instead of deciding on these 4, to wait, think about it, talk to
Yes.
our new economic development director, more feedback from the council? And, okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Maloney.
And I would just add to that, that we are going to be deploying the survey and doing focus groups and doing SWOT analysis for the rebranding committee within the next couple of months. And we will be able to inform this process along the way. So maybe because we've already started that, we can be able to use some of that information to help with some of these questions we have.
Right.
And to help and create the subcommittees as well.
Councilmember Hondo.
This is all really exciting to all of us, and I'm very excited about doing this, but I want to make sure that we know what we're doing, we know how to get there, and we do it right. And so some of these things tonight, I think we just need to think about, study, and when it's time and we have more direction, make the final decision.
Right. Okay. Deputy Mayor Burbidge.
Thank you. I would just add that our comprehensive plan was initiated in our early years and has been reviewed and modified over the years does lay out a vision and some strategies. And I think it's important to, as part of this process, to have some reference to what exists in that comprehensive plan so that we develop more of an awareness of some of those specifics so that we make sure that we're not overlooking the availability of that information. I think to some degree there might be some surprise among some folks in the community and maybe even on the council at times as to what has been discussed in the past and how, to what degree, it'll be interesting to see, okay, how relevant do we conclude ourselves and what is the community's reaction to the vision that has been laid out already. But I think a lot of what we're talking about really is being more specific, I believe, in our goals. What are the things, what I'm hearing is, what are we missing? What do we see other places that we think could be beneficial to Federal Way, and what kinds of strategies need to be developed in order to achieve those additional elements in our city?
Council? Amy Jo, do you have?
Oh, I apologize. That's all of the slides that we have for tonight. So we've talked about all of these things already. So if there's anything else that council wants to add, or if there's any topic that we didn't discuss enough, otherwise we can take this information that we've obtained from tonight, digest that, and then discuss again on August 12th.
And a decision will be forthcoming soon regarding our economic development director and who that person will be and when that person will start. And I'll be in communication first with the council and then the general public about this issue. But I think that's going to help us bring some focus to this. But I think it is important to start focusing around these details. I would say also that one of the things that a SWOT analysis, but also an inventory, and maybe even a sort of where the market is or where we find ourselves in the market, is that we may, while we may fashion in a Federal Way as a med tech or aerospace or higher education, I mean, I think that the needs assessment that's being done at higher ed will inform us about that kind of direction. So some of these I hope will help us, but I think that's perhaps one of the things we're going to ask this task force is, should we be going in ultimately should we be going in a particular direction in regard to a particular industry, or should there be a multimodal approach? Anyway, it's a very interesting, and that's some of the expertise we're going to be able to get from them. For the good of the order, does anybody else have any comments? Councilmember Moore.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I appreciate what you said about our young professionals earlier and the fact that that's being part of the thought process as we're moving forward with this, because I think that's something that I've experienced, and that's the question that I've asked quite a bit over the last couple of years is where are our young folks going to be going towards, right? And what can we do to have young families want to stay in Federal Way and start raising their families and yet have a place for them. So
Right.
I just wanted to say I appreciated hearing that comment and
Right.
statement.
And this is where the branding comes in, where we want families to move to Federal Way, and it would be great to see that kind of thing. All right, we are in recess to move to executive session at this time. That is pursuant to RCW 4230-140-4B, collective bargaining, and evaluate qualifications of employee pursuant to 4230-1101G.